Chapter 14, Encounter,
One more coat should do it.
said Yosef as he helped Daniel and the boys brush on the last of the concrete. A dusty Jeep pulled down the driveway, and an older man approached. Although he was pushing 60, his slender frame was agile enough to pass for 40. He shifted a baseball cap on his head. Yosef and Daniel looked up and grinned.
Hello there, John. Glad you could join us.
John walked over and placed his hands on his hips.
Well, I see you've been busy, and why no one is answering the phone. Just thought I would check on everybody after all of that shaking.
Davy noticed that John was wearing a watch that matched the rest of the men's wristwatches in his family.
We've got it all under control. Emma and Rebecca are resting in the house. They must have slept through the whole thing,
Said Yosef.
You still live in that small house beyond the vineyard, Uncle John?
Asked Daniel. Davy looked up in surprise. He recognized John from the family gathering, but had no idea he was his dad's uncle.
Yeah, I love it there. It's a peaceful spot for the most part, except on nights like this one.
So, you're my uncle too?
Asked Davy.
Are you serious? Don't you remember me? I thought I was famous.
Said John with a grin. Adam snickered in response.
You don't remember all of the times we played ball together? Dug in the dirt? I even stayed with you in America for a while when you were little.
Davy squinted and thought he had a faint memory of a younger John throwing him the blue ball from their childhood.
Actually, yeah, I think I remember you.
You think you remember? Tell you what, how about you boys finish and wash up? Then we'll have a little game of baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Davy, Adam, Levi, and Caleb all cheered.
Us old men against you youngsters. We'll see what you're made of.
Said John playfully. The boys finished the concrete and cleaned up in no time. Then they turned on a few more lights and set up bases in the field. The air was fresh and warm, and the stars hung like crystals in the night sky. Chester was excited, and it seemed his paw had healed entirely.
All right,
Said John.
let's see who wins the coin toss.
He gingerly placed a coin on his thumb and sent it spinning high. Thankfully, the outdoor lights aided them in finding the coin.
You're up, boys.
Davy went up to bat first as the others took their places. Yosef tossed the ball, and Davy launched it beyond reach. He ran past first base, then second, and slid hard into third as Daniel nearly tagged him with the ball. Davy looked up at him, stunned to see his dad run with strength.
Thought your old man didn't have it in him anymore, huh?
Daniel teased. Yosef chuckled at his older brother. He was glad to see him and Davy smile after everything they had been through. Next up to bat was Levi. John pitched, and Levi barely missed the curveball.
Come on, Levi, that a boy.
Yelled Caleb, making Levi's face more determined. John smiled and pitched again, and this time Levi smashed the ball through the center, allowing Davy a home run and his swift approach to second. Caleb high-fived Davy and grabbed the bat. Adam grabbed another bat and began warming up for his turn. However, a low rumble made him pause for a moment.
Just a small aftershock, nothing to worry about.
Said Yosef. Caleb shifted his hat and steadied himself. John pitched a fastball. Caleb swung too late, and the lack of resistance brought up that old feeling of failure.
Come on, Caleb, you used to play like Mickey Mantle, but don't start playing like Mickey Mouse.
Yelled Levi from across the field. Caleb playfully smirked, and the others laughed. He spat on the ground as if the act could free him of his blunder. John pitched again. Caleb landed it smoothly and sent it high into the air. However, a bursting light in the sky blinded him before Yosef could recover it. The light toned down into a bright orb that hovered over them silently. They all crouched down, shielding their eyes. Suddenly, two other glowing orbs shot out of the first object and danced overhead. They separated and darted past, one to the left, the other to the right. In the blink of an eye, they both shot over to the sealed cave and hovered there. The boys started to gather toward the men in fear. Then there was more rumbling and a low sound, almost like a growl that rose from below the earth's surface. Daniel clenched his eyes shut and began to pray in Jesus' name.
Please, Lord, help us in Jesus' name.
The family's jewels from their watches began to glow intensely. As soon as they were ready to flee, the growl and the rumbling stopped, and the orbs were gone as if it had never happened. A still, eerie silence replaced the encounter. Even Chester and the sheep were quiet.
What's going on, Dad?
asked Davy, bewildered.
I don't know, Davy.
He said, holding him close to shield him from whatever would come. Just then, Rebecca eased out of the house in her robe and sandals, her face distraught.
It's happening again, isn't it?
She asked Yosef.
It will be okay, Hayakara dear.
Yosef enclosed her in his arms.
Again?
Davy gulped. He glanced at his watch, and its glow had faded. He noticed that Adam had one nearly identical to his. Adam glanced up at Davy with concern, just as his faded as well. Caleb and Levi observed this and wondered what it all meant.
This has happened before.
Daniel asked Yosef.
Yes, it has.
Yosef looked shaken, but he held it together.
It all began the night of Abba's death, when that man came and stole the onyx stone. Something like this tends to happen every time he gets near us.
Something similar happened the last time I went on a dig, but I'm not at liberty to give those details,
said John, glancing at Yosef and rubbing his head. His hand shook as he remembered the thunder, smoke, and hailstones, the charred remains of several members of his previous team.
Don't you work for the same people that Abba used to work with?
Daniel asked.
That would be correct,
said John.
I'm pulling out of that job. I thought I could get more information by infiltrating the enemy's ranks, but boy, was I wrong. It is time for me to retire. They have Yosef going with them next week, though.
Adam shot a glance at his dad as if he had learned something new and disturbing.
That explains a lot,
said Daniel. Davy and the rest of the boys looked at him questioningly. Daniel began to furrow his brows in anger. He and John walked over to the cave entrance and observed that the seal was still secure.
Is that a sure thing, Yosef?
Rebecca looked up at him, concerned.
Let's talk about this later, my dear,
he said.
We should get back inside and check on Ima,
said Daniel. John tipped his hat and said goodbye as they followed the path back toward the house. The boys looked at one another in bewilderment, wondering how strange sightings like this were becoming the norm. What was happening in their world? It was as if no one had any real answers, so they just attempted to go on with what was left of their lives. Once inside, Daniel and Yosef saw that Ima was safe and sound. They hurried the boys to another room, and Yosef set up their game so he and Daniel could talk. Rebecca trailed off back to bed. However, the boys turned the volume down to hear how their conversation would unfold. Rebecca listened in too, hoping that Yosef's older brother could talk some sense into him.
So, you wanted help with the vineyard, for what? So you could go off and work with those guys?
Daniel demanded to know. The boys could hear Daniel begin pacing the floor.
No, that's not it at all. You know I have workers who can take care of that.
Yosef kept a calm tone, not wanting his brother, whom he had missed for so long, to grow more upset. He placed his hand on his shoulder.
I truly wanted my brother to be welcome back home. Now that you and your family are here, it feels as if we are finally connected. By giving you back your vineyard, wrongs from the past have been made right.
Daniel took a deep breath and closed his eyes.
I am sorry, Yosef. You and Rebecca are too kind. I've missed you too, Ahi.
He patted Yosef's hand and they both sat down.
I want to assure you, you have nothing to worry about. The archaeologists are not the same team as before, Daniel. Last week they replaced them all with an entirely new group. They have a new man in charge, the one I told you about before, Dr. Crowning.
The politician? Of course, he's a politician too. Don't you remember what they have done to our family throughout our lives? Abba started up that company for archaeological research, and they robbed it from him. We know they have to be behind that man who still attacks us today and robbed Abba's onyx stone during his funeral.
Daniel attempted to lower his voice.
Why would you and John even associate yourselves with anyone who could be connected with that?
Because we have just found something very important. Something very precious.
Yosef was aware he had raised his voice and attempted to hold back his mixture of emotions. He wanted to tell Daniel what the important thing was, but was under strict confidence until the time was right.
Many lives have been lost to recover this relic, but they need my help to finish the job.
Why you?
I cannot say.
Yosef began to put up a wall, and Daniel sensed it immediately.
You mean it's that dangerous, and you are the only one with the right techniques who is willing?
Said Daniel. Yosef was silent.
I just pray that it is worth risking your life. Do you realize what this is doing to your wife? Or what it would do to her and your son if anything happened to you?
Yosef put his head down.
Ahi, let me tell you, nothing is worth losing your family, or your soul.
Please, Ahi, don't lecture me now,
said Yosef.
I want to tell you about what Lydia showed me before,
began Daniel. However, Yosef rose from his chair. He knew where this conversation was going, but was not ready to hear it. He looked at Daniel with tears in his eyes.
Please, Ach Gadol.
He turned away.
I can't talk about this anymore.
He mumbled a good night and trailed off to bed.
Good night, Daniel.
Yosef walked into his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and breathed heavily. Then he lay down with his back toward a silent Rebecca. The boys in the next room turned off their game and sat in silence. Daniel rested his head in his hands, knowing his brother was lost, a mirror image of himself from just a few short months ago.